Da det bare å sette seg ned, because we are now going to have a presentation by Dr. Maya Ackerman. Hello, Maya. Hi. Live and direct from California, Dr. Maya Ackerman is a generative AI pioneer. She's a tech innovator and a professor. She's also the CEO of Wave AI, an AI-powered songwriting tool for lyrics and melody. She will be talking about writing lyrics with AI and lyric writing as a creative process using AI. Ain't that right, Maya? Can you hear us?
Yes. All sounds good.
Yeah. Good morning to you. Straight from California, right?
Yeah. Hello. Great to be here.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody.
So, take it away, Maya. The floor is yours, and we're excited to have you with us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me again. I'm just going to screen share here, and we will get started. All right. So I know it's a remote talk, but we'll do our best to make it interactive as much as possible. I am going to keep an eye on the audience room, which you've been so kind to help me see. So, musical AI, I'm going to be talking specifically about generative AI for music, meaning the kind of AI systems that have the capacity to create music to some degree, or to create certain aspects of music. So we're not going to be talking about stem splitting. We're not going to be talking about mastering. There's a lot of ways in which AI has already been part of the creative process for us for decades. We're talking specifically about this new wave of generative AI as it relates to music. We'll talk a little bit about background. It's brief, but I think it's so important to ground ourselves in the history of generative AI throughout this conversation. We'll share some core concepts that are relevant for people who want to use musical AI systems or maybe don't want to use them, just to help understand what this is all about and what the potential is, and also relevant for people who want to engage in creating generative AI systems. And then a good chunk of the talk will be devoted to a demo and then questions. A note about the art. So my presentations tend to be full of really cool, I think, art pieces. I make all of them using Midjourney. And so that's just sort of a way for me to express my ideas through a visual medium. The art is not perfect. It has flaws, which I kind of like because it expresses the flaws of the technology itself. So I don't correct it intentionally. So we're going to start with a little bit of prehistory of musical AI as it applies specifically to generative systems. So the main point that I want to make here is that generative AI, and generative AI for music in particular, is not new at all, actually. We've had generative AI systems since about the 1950s. One notable system is called Experiments in Musical Intelligence, AMI for short. And it was created by a professor of UC Santa Cruz named David Cope. And Cope's system was so good that it passed what's called the Turing test for computational creativity already back in the previous century. So at one point, David Cope went to a music conference, and he said that he discovered a new Bach piece that was never heard before, and everybody got super excited about it. And then he played the new Bach, and people were even more excited. How is it possible that this beautiful piece of Bach music was never discovered until that point? And then David Cope revealed to them that it was actually a piece of music generated by his system, and everybody got really mad at him. So in some sense, resistance to generative AI is about as old as generative AI itself. So I'm going to play to you one of my favorite pieces of that David Cope created through Amy. All right. There's a whole bunch more music made by Amy available on YouTube. Now, as a brief note, these early innovations in generative AI also happen in other creative domains. It happened concurrently, in particular, with generative AI in the visual arts. And this is all making music and art and dance choreography and recipes and everything under the sun without LLMs, without these massive models that we have today. This in particular is a system called Aaron by Harold Cohen, who was professor at UC San Diego. And he actually created these systems before you could easily put pixels on the computer screen. This is kind of this big mechanical arm that that Aaron used to have, and it used to draw kind of directly on paper, and it drew specifically in Harold Cohen's unique style that he taught Aaron to draw in. So we already had this really, really cool stuff. I actually had the pleasure of meeting Harold Cohen almost a decade ago now, and I was just so impressed with the passion he had for questions like whose creativity really is. And he believed that Aaron's creativity was entirely Harold Cohen creativity. He didn't like the idea of assigning creative abilities to the machine. So with all this really amazing stuff happening, and of course, these are two famous examples, but these are just two examples of many that researchers have been developing over decades, creating many different systems that make art, music, dance choreography, and just about any other creative endeavor. But even companies weren't getting involved in this until about 2016, which is really not that long ago. And of course, there was hardly any public awareness of it. But just a little bit about how this got into public awareness. Google started doing Google Magenta. And then, of course, when large companies get involved, there's a lot of press around it. They also created Deep Dream, which created these really cool hallucinatory images. Microsoft got in trouble in 2016 with Microsoft Tay, which was a chatbot which became racist within 16 hours. And ultimately created OpenAI, right? Ultimately, Microsoft really is a majority stakeholder in OpenAI, which creates a separation between Microsoft's experimentation and kind of lashback on Microsoft itself, because it's doing it through this third party. And OpenAI was also kind of hanging around for a while, first, releasing a whole bunch of GPT models. And then in 2022, it was preparing to release DALL-E. And then a company called Stability AI took a model from Runway ML and kind of put together a business plan for creating their own models. And the CEO was able to raise over $100 million. So this, before the big awakening of generative AI at the very tail end of 2022, it was really what happened with Stability AI that woke up the investment community. And then a month later, we had ChatGPT drop, which sort of woke up the rest of the world to generative AI being on the map. So it's very, very old technology in some sense that sort of just recently entered the public sphere. Okay, so I want to spend a little bit of time sharing with you some principles of musical AI, specifically generative AI that applies to music. I've picked these principles to particularly be relevant for musicians, songwriters, but also if you want to build your own generative AI systems for music, or if you're part of a company that wants to integrate it, this also has relevance in that context. So typically when we start considering the whole idea of generative AI, we usually imagine the machine doing the work by itself. So we call this autonomous AI. You saw this way of thinking in academia for a long time. So when generative AI was just starting in academia, kind of a lot of focus on autonomous AI being completely independent, being the goal. And you kind of saw that a lot in 2022, in early 2023, amongst companies as well, this idea that, oh, isn't it amazing if the AI just does everything it does all by itself? Doesn't that make the AI great? So a lot of sort of glorification of this idea of the independently creative AI. Now, this has value, of course. Sometimes you want the AI to be independent, but we really should be careful not to over-glorify this concept, because the sort of parallel concept to that are co-creative systems. And again, this is a really well-trodden path. This is not a new idea. And the concept is that the human and machine could collaborate together. Kind of maybe a little bit like two people could collaborate. And as musicians, we are so familiar with the concept of collaborating with another person. I mean, which hit song is really created by one human being? We're used to collaboration. Collaborating is at the core of musical creativity. And so what does it mean to collaborate on music with a machine? And what does it mean for the AI to meaningfully contribute to the creative process and not just be a tool? So that really kind of challenges some of our way of thinking about technology. This idea of doing co-creative work with an AI system, the idea of this being a collaboration is really deep and has a lot of sort of different ways of slicing it. It could mean that the AI is doing some part of music making that maybe you don't like to do, or maybe it's something that you're less strong at, while you focus on the parts of music making that you really enjoy and where you really shine. It could mean that it helps you get started. It could mean that it helps you finish a song. It could mean that you're bouncing ideas back and forth. It's really can be sliced and diced in so many different ways. One really important concept that I find around musical AI, especially in the context of collaborating with the machine, is around creative control. So one of the most frustrating things of trying to do something creative with an AI system is when you feel that you have no control. So suddenly the AI takes over, suddenly it's doing what it wants. And even when you know how to do something or you know what you want, you have no way of communicating that, no way of expressing that. So that's not good. That's not good. So that I consider to be a really kind of foundational idea that I hope eventually will become more mainstream. And that's the idea of giving the human user of the AI as much creative control as possible. So the person should never feel hindered by the AI. So everything the person can do by themselves, they should be able to continue to do by themselves, even when working with the AI. And the AI should really just fit into the creative process in a way that's helpful and not overly invasive. Again, because of this glorification of autonomous AI, you often don't see that in kind of commercialized generative AI systems, but it is starting to change. So this idea of creative control is really key. So one way that we can sort of visualize this is as a spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, you have the AI creating music by itself, whatever that means, On the right, you have a human or multiple humans creating music without any AI involvement. In the middle of this collaborative spectrum, you can have let's say, the human and machine doing an equal contribution, if you can kind of hypothetically imagine that. But it's actually a really, really wide spectrum, the idea of working together with an AI. It could mean that the human is doing almost everything, but the machine is just helping a tiny little bit. It could mean that the robot is doing almost everything, and the person is just making some really simple choices, answering some, making some quick choices about genre and tempo and maybe instruments, and then the machine does everything. So it really is a spectrum. Just like when working with another person, it could mean different things to say that you collaborated with somebody on a song. In the same sense, integrating AI into your musical process could mean many different things. It could mean completely giving up control, and it could mean just getting a tiny bit of help, or it could mean some kind of something in the middle. Okay, let's get a little bit more concrete about this. How can generative AI help musicians? So I believe that one of the most important ways that generative AI can work with us is around inspiration. And that really gets very profound. So where generative AI really shines, and that's not just in music, but in general, is around the idea of exploring the creative space of possibilities, coming up with seeds of ideas. When you sit down to write a song, let's say you want to write a song um, about long winter nights, right? Let's say it brings some kind of childhood memories for you. There's a whole universe of possibilities of the kind of songs you could write based on this idea. It's really is a whole world. It's billions of different good songs you could write, right? About this one idea. And where the AI really shines is to help tap into different possibilities, different ideas for lyrics, different ideas for melodies. So it can search the creative space in some sense, much more effectively than people. It can't necessarily create the whole music nearly as well as a person. It can't connect to the human experience. It can't necessarily make the best choices. But as far as helping us sort of blow up, helping us open up a world of options, in my professional opinion, there is really nothing as powerful as generative AI for this particular sort of the ability to explore the creative space of possibilities, not necessarily in a cooked form, but as far as sort of tapping into different options. So as a result of that, as far as being an inspiration engine, keeping the creative juices flowing, breaking out of the way that you typically write music and going in a different direction, there is really a lot of value in generative AI on the creative side when we view it from that perspective. Perhaps you've heard of this idea of machine hallucinations. People are upset at ChatGPT that it basically makes up answers very, very often. It feels like it's lying. You ask it a question, you ask it to write a bio about you, you ask it, something that has a right answer, and it just makes something up. So we call it hallucinations. But in the context of something creative, in the context of helping us with musical concepts, this tendency of generative AI to be deeply hallucinatory becomes very positive. It becomes something we can really lean into. It becomes imaginative and not deceptive, right? So I wanted to kind of make this connection as well. So on the practical side of leaned into some of these, the right kind of AI system can help you start a song. I really like it that BandLab, once they integrated some generative AI capabilities, they actually called it a song starter. I think that's really on point. Generative AI can also help you finish a song. We've had many, many artists tell us that they would have a song sitting in their drawer, or more likely on a computer file, for years because they were stuck, for example, on the second verse or the bridge. and they fed their stuff into our system. They, let's say, gave the lyrics to Lyric Studio, and that'd be done in a few minutes. And that's because of generative AI's incredible capabilities to help a person explore the space of creative possibilities. Then it can expand your writing style. Again, I'm not saying that this is sort of all generative AI systems. This is sort of the systems that are designed for that purpose. If you come into it with that intention, it can help you expand your creative style. It can help you intentionally step outside the kind of creative choices that you make. Most of the time, it kind of help you try something else, which can sometimes be intimidating. This is a little bit similar to the idea of trying a new genre by collaborating with somebody who is collaborating with a person who writes in a different style than you usually focus on. And then the more common use case, I'm not super excited about that one, but it's also important for professional musicians. So in that sense, it's still very valuable. And that's the idea of improving productivity. We've had artists tell us that they just finish a lot more songs per day. They write faster using our tools, which is also meaningful. So again, we're talking here about generative AI. So not necessarily all AI systems are going to apply. There's a lot of AI systems like stem splitting, like Lander has a great AI-powered mastering system. There's a lot of AI that has been used for a very long time in the music industry and coming out right now that's not generative. On the generative side, one way we can sort of break down the available systems is to look at the creation of lyrics, top-line melodies or vocal melodies, and backing tracks. You can also technically consider voice generation in here. Voice generation is, from a technical standpoint, also not generative AI, which is notable because a few months ago, when we had the release of songs in the style of Drake's, which kind of really shook up the music industry, and that was attributed to generative AI, that's called vocal synthesis. Again, we had this well before generative AI arose in popularity. And technically, singing voices are not part of generative AI, but I'm happy to talk about them if anybody has any questions about this anyways. So most often when people think about generative AI for music, a lot of companies that do that focus on backing track creation. So music without vocals, without lyrics. Some of my favorite companies in the space, there's a lot of companies doing really, really, really cool things. There is Mewbird, there is Soundfuls, there is Ava. Those are just some of my favorites. Really, really cool stuff. One thing that I really like about what's happening in that part of the industry is that some of these companies are starting to make it easier for musicians to kind of interact with this music creation. So it's not the most common for backing track creation is you just make a small number of choices and then the AI generates a backing track, and we're starting to see that start to change. So for example, with Ava, if you create the music, you can then export all the stems in MIDI format and modify them yourself. So it kind of gives you a little bit of a deeper way to engage. And I encourage you to check out Mewbird and Soundful. Just really cool, innovative ways of making music. And there's a whole bunch more. It's a whole universe. Lyrics and vocal melodies is where we focus on at Wave AI. We have two products called Lyric Studio and Melody Studio. People talk about the rise of generative AI as something that's still happening, that still will happen in the music industry. Meanwhile, we see about 10,000 people a day on our products. We have notable artists using it. We've had viral music created on our platform. We've had a #1 album on the iTunes hip hop charts. So it's really here. Musical AI is here. It's happening. There are people who use it really extensively. So let's do a demo. I'm going to show you a couple of products and we'll make a song together. That's always the best part. So I hope we can do this collaboratively, because that's the most fun. Okay, so this is Lyric Studio. This is our flagship product. It was released at the end of 2020, well before, ChatGPT and such. Really proud to share that we make our own models, our own machine learning models completely from scratch. They're designed to do nothing but lyrics. They don't do anything else. Let's start with a pop song. Can I have people shout out a couple of topics?
Abyss.
Abyss. Yeah. Abyss. And one more.
Broken.
Abyss and broken. You know what? I love it when people just go for something dark. Sometimes I do this demo when people are like, happy, joy. That's not how music works. I'm just kidding, of course. The kingdom of... Okay, you're all musicians. Just help me pick. Help me pick what's speaking to you.
I can't breathe anymore. And I can't breathe anymore.
I can't breathe anymore. We're not going to start the song with and. I can't breathe anymore. Ta-da! I'm showing you at first a beginner use case, okay? So this is like click, generate, somebody brand new. Okay. How about now?
I can hear your heartbeat.
I can hear your heartbeat. Again, generate. And of course, you can pick multiple generations, you can edit, you can sort of make it your own throughout the process. How about now?
On the dark side of the street.
On the dark side of the street. And one more line.
How about now? Where time and space collide.
Where time and space collide. All right, I can't breathe anymore. I can hear your heartbeat on the dark side of the street where time and space. That's really good. You did a good job. I love it. Okay, so that's something you can do. You can kind of like craft something together, just putting together the sentences from the AI. And people come in. About half of our users are new to songwriting, so they come in, they press a few buttons, and suddenly they can make something. So they get really excited. A lot of people are intimidated to write songs. But when you have somebody who already knows how to write music, they often come in with some of their own ideas. They might come in with an almost finished songs where they're just missing the third verse. Or they might come in with a concept, a very, very specific idea in mind that you can't just capture with topics. And they want to expand on it. They want to build on their own thought. So I'm just going to show you briefly how this can look. So let's turn off, we're going to turn off topics and just kind of focus on what I'm writing here. So it kind of started here a bit of a dark song. So we could say maybe, I see my suffering bleeding through your tears. Okay, kind of very, very specific line, something metaphorical, something kind of dark. So let's see. Okay. Okay. I don't know what this means exactly, but I really like it. I hear you crying, my hands in the thorns. Okay, that's kind of abstract. Embrace your pain and your mortal harms. The agony of your lifeless forms. That's crazy. That's really good. And what's really interesting here is that it's an endless vein of ideas now built on what I'm writing. It's literally endless. I have built entire songs by typing one line. and getting enough ideas to sketch out the verse, the bridge, the hook, just by continuously clicking on the same line until it's almost like my one line gets really juiced and expanded, and then I can kind of finish fleshing out the song. I see your weakness in, let's say, in my nightmare. Sometimes it's just a little change. I see you suffering eternally. I hear your voice and screams exertion in your prayers. Or sometimes you read a line and it's just a few of the words, you know. Sometimes just, oh, the word scream seems to really fit what I'm doing here. Or maybe it could give me an idea, like I'll kind of take it but change it a lot. I hear, okay, I hear myself in the screams of your prayer, something like that, right? It can also, like, it doesn't have to be word for word, and it's really limitless. It never ends. It can keep milking your idea in different ways, twisting and turning it forever. And, you know, sometimes it's you know, sometimes I don't like what it's saying, and that's okay too. I think that's really important to be
I'm a suicidal person.
right, like I don't like that. I don't like this suggestion. I think that's you know, makes me uncomfortable even, but that's okay. You know, I'm gonna get stuff I hate, but I'm gonna get stuff I love, and it's something that I think it's almost like I just need to know that I'm making the choices, and it's okay if it gives me ideas I don't like, you know. I'm the weapon of your tears. I mean, it's really really never ends. I feel my body disappears. Maybe I want to make this fear. So it's just kind of this, now we're just expanding it, just expanding one idea. So I really like to do that. Now, if somebody comes in with a completely different thought, like I be riding down this old hood, suddenly I forget how to spell and I have a completely different style, you know. Um, the AI very easily just takes a turn with me very, very quickly. Just I be showing up in my young in Hollywood. I'm a gangster like I should. I don't even know what some of these words are, but it's a completely different style all of a sudden. And it's anything you write, it's anything, any style. People have come in with styles I didn't know existed, and Lyric Studio just kind of easily follows them. So as you can tell here, you know, illustrating some of the principles I was talking about earlier, it's really it's really a human driven process. You can ignore the AI completely. Sometimes I would just sit there and I have my own ideas, and for 20 minutes I forget there's even an AI system here. And sometimes I have songs that are 95% Lyric Studio lines because it was just so on point. I so quickly crafted it. And it can be anything in between, but I'm always in full control. The AI is never taking any creativity away from me. Anyways, does anybody want to give it a line to see what it does?
We have a question here.
Mhm.
Is, hello. Is there a reason to why it's so like self-centered, like I and me and you all the time? Is it like, is that something you can modify while working
Uh,
with it?
yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, in part, it's my input here, right? So it's kind of like I prompted it with something that's I focused. If we give it a line, you know, that here it doesn't say I and me. Let's see what it's gonna do. Yeah, so you see, we gave it something that where time and space collide, and there is less of this tendency now. So these two sentences still have the word I, but the other ones don't. So it kind of depends. It's mirroring some of my unconscious choices here, basically. Yeah, great question. Appreciate it.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
How did you, when you built this tool, what kind of lyrics did you feed it with? And yeah, like how did you train the machine?
Yeah, so this is it's a really important aspect of machine learning, this kind of like training. So there's a ton of sort of public domain data in here. There's even some Shakespeare to teach it something about poetry. This was done, I mean, many years ago. The original model was built back in 2019, you know, before 2020. We already had a model for lyric creation. It's very different from the way a lot of language models work. So it's not an LLM, it's not built on top of an LLM, but really kind of builds on a vast data set of open source material around poetry. So let me show you one more thing, and then we'll do just questions, because I think we're already cutting into the question period. I'm gonna stop sharing just to make sure that we share audio. Tell me if you can hear this. So, you know, you're all musicians, you could probably type in your own chords, but this is sort of an onboarding for the song. There are so many ways you can sing the phrase, "I can't breathe anymore." Right? It's a world of possibilities for that one little phrase. And what this system does, and this is where I struggled a lot as a musician, is it comes up with different ways that you can sing this line. And kind of like it. It's also kind of nice. I like that better. And then you can go in here and edit. That's really important for us, that people can edit. Anything that AI can do, you can change. You're never stuck with it. Also, if you enter your own line, then it can generate more ideas based on your own melody. So I'm going to quickly just generate this and okay, great. Just going to do this really quickly because I want to make sure there's a lot of time for questions. But this is, again, it's a creative process. So you could really kind of take your time, listen to many different possibilities, make it your own, and really capture your creative vision with it. Okay, I'm just picking whatever sounds good enough at the moment. Then I will attempt to sing it for you here in real time. And so combining Lyric Studio and Melody Studio, you can essentially create an entire lead sheet, kind of the bones of the song. And in the near future, you'll be able to upload a backing track and then create the lead sheet on top of the backing track as well. Okay, perfect. Let's play this. We got the beginning of a song. All right. So I do want to make sure that we use the last little bit of time we have left for questions.
Enunciation.
There's a question about how sophisticated it is in terms of pronunciation. Like, to me, it sounded quite like on point, and like where you pronounce the different parts of the words.
Yeah, so because it's this, okay, if you take an arbitrary melody, I mean, a lot of songwriters in the room, so you probably already know, if you take an arbitrary melody and arbitrary lyrics, it's garbage. It's horrible. You can't even listen to it. So this is again a model that learns specifically that relationship between language and melody. And so most of the suggestions, the word breakdown makes sense.
Any other questions for Maya? Like, Yep.
Thank you, Maya. This was very fun, I would say. But there was in the heading there was you could kind of save your songs, my songs, no? But
Okay.
but let's say you use, as you said, 95% of the suggestions. Is it still your song?
Yeah, that's such an important question. This whole aspect of ownership. You know, I like that you brought it up, and I appreciate that you also point out that this is not entirely all happy time, right? Like it's kind of shaking up the music industry. It's a lot of this is making artists uncomfortable for good reason. And I think one of the main reasons that generative AI in music is creating a challenge is precisely because of the concept of ownership and how important it is for us for functioning society. And so it's less clear who owns it when you create it with AI, even if the AI makers don't mind you saying that it's yours. It kind of makes us wonder what's whose anymore, right? So if some AI strain on someone else's data, does everything created with the AI belong to them? So I think on a simple level, you could say that if somebody relies on Lyric Studio arguably too much, let's say they even blindly just click the first suggestion repeatedly, then you could say maybe it's not theirs at all in some sort of conceptual level. But I think in reality, the way people use it, they always give at least a little bit of themselves, in practice. But the question is so deep. The question you ask is so deep and profound. It has so many aspects to it.
I have a really easy question. Does Lyric Studio work in many languages, or is it just English, American?
So right now it's just English. We did train the models on Japanese and Italian for 2 very different projects. So it can conceptually be made for any language, but we have only rolled it out in English at this particular point.
And Lyric Studio, is that a subscription or is it an open thing, or how does it work?
It's a subscription.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is a free tier. You get a certain number of generations for free, so you don't need to. So if you wanted to just kind of like tinker with it and get a feel for it, you can do that for free. But it's very, we price it to be really accessible for everybody.
We have time for one more question if there's anyone. Yes.
Hello. Does this program learn your choices, and will it become better in knowing you after time?
So yes, to some degree it does. A lot of the adopting happens very, very fast. We kind of make sure that it follows you right off the get-go. Yeah, that's the short answer here.
Well, I think time is running out. Thank you so much, Maya, for an inspired and creative AI tour into your world.
Absolute pleasure.
Big
Thanks for
round of
having me.
applause for Maya Ackerman, everyone.